Okay, we are excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Wendy Birmingham. Dr. Birmingham is a assistant professor in psychology and has been here at BYU since 2013. She studied at BYU and received her bachelor's degree here in psychology, and then went on to get both a master's degree and PhD in social psychology at the University of Utah, and then went on to complete a postdoc in cancer control from the Huntsman Cancer Institute in 2013. Her research here at BYU, she focuses on spousal relationship quality and how it impacts overall health. Her research looks at two main pathways linking relationship quality and quantity to health outcomes: the physiological pathways and behavioral pathways. Recently, and this is what we'll be hearing a little bit about today, she has been interviewing women at the Counseling Center to collect qualitative data on eating behavior and body satisfaction and how that contributes to relationships. She is passionate about women's studies and got involved in the women's studies program by being asked to teach the Intro to Women's Studies class, and she said that after teaching it, she was hooked.
She has been awarded the Citation Award for Excellence in Research from Society in Behavioral Medicine, the College of Behavioral Science Honor Roll Scholarship Award for Excellence in Research from the University of Utah, and the Citation Award for Excellence in Research from Society of Behavioral Medicine. Dr. Birmingham is married, has 4 kids and 7 grandkids, and a fun fact about Dr. Birmingham is that during the time she's raising her kids, she owned her own quilting business. We're excited to learn from her. Please welcome Dr. Birmingham.
Thank you. Well, so as noted, that is my, so I don't use speakers, and anybody who's been in my class knows I wander. So can you hear? Okay, good. So yeah, my main area of research is looking at families, looking at couples, and how the relationship quality that they have between each other affects their physiological health. So one of the main things I look at is cardiovascular disease risk. And I look at that through blood pressure. So that's one of the main health outcomes that I look at, is how these relationships can lead to cardiovascular disease down the road. One of the biggest predictors of cardiovascular disease risk is blood pressure. So a lot of what I look at is blood pressure. In this particular study, I looked at both those physiological responses, so blood pressure, but I also looked at behavior specifically. So this one is on eating behaviors. And I did work with Dr. Cavallini at the counseling at the Resource Center, the counseling center over there. We did all of the interviews in my lab, and my students did most of the interviews with these women. So we looked at, we had 61 women who participated in this study, and if you know anything about qualitative data, which is doing the interviews, that is a massive amount of people. Much of the qualitative studies are done with like 20 or 25 women, or 20 to 25 people. So we were pretty excited to be able to get that large of a sample. Okay, so let me tell you really quickly some facts about eating disorders. So it's more common clearly in women than it is men. Although men definitely have eating disorders, and we see those in men as well, but it's much more common in women, and particularly adolescents are at risk for eating disorders. When we look at eating disorders, they're characterized by those sort of eating ideals that end up in poor eating patterns. So when we think about eating disorders, we have anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, and then binge eating. So those are the main ones that we talk about. What that leads to are these really severe perceptions of what our body looks like. So even though your body looks perfectly normal, you think you're fat. You think that overall your body is terrible, or the proportions of your body. And so that's where eating disorders come from. Now, of importance, eating disorders are a very important cause of morbidity and mortality. So morbidity is disease, right? So eating disorders are often associated with even higher mortality rates. And in fact, You can see there the anorexia nervosa has the highest mortality rate, right, death, of any other psychiatric disorder. So if you think about depression, you might think that depression causes an awful lot of mortality rates, but it's actually eating disorders that cause quite a few mortality rates. So in fact, for females between 15 and 24 years of age, mortality rate for anorexia is 10 times higher than the death rate for all other causes of death in that age group, right? And one of the things that really is a drive in why these women experience, or mortality, why they die, is cardiovascular events. So when you're severely underweight, it's a real stress on your heart. And so we see, do I need to be over here?
Can you be behind the podium? The video can't see or hear you right now.
Oh, I walk around a lot. Okay, that's really hard for me, but I'll do it. Okay. So cardiovascular events are one of the main reasons that we see death among those. So statistics-wise, we have about 30 million Americans who are affected by some kind of eating disorder. 1 in 5 women struggles with an eating disorder of some kind. The most common behavior, and this is a really important part of how eating disorders are developed, is dieting. And many of us have said, I'm on a diet, but that's one of the biggest predictors, beginning dieting, of developing an eating disorder. This one I just pulled up today. 91% of women surveyed, this is from the Department of Health and Human Services, 91% of women who were surveyed on this particular college campus had tried controlling their weight. 91% said that they had tried controlling their weight with dieting. And when they reported that, they said that they tried to control their weight often or always. So when we go back into that idea here, that the most common behavior that precedes and predicts eating disorders, we've got these women who are always saying that they're dieting. In fact, this is the really awful part, is that this sort of belief that my body needs to be changed, that I'm too fat, begins so early. So 42% of first to third graders wanted to be thinner. First to third graders. 81% of 9 to 10-year-olds were afraid of being fat. Half are dieting of those 9 to 10-year-olds, and when we get to 9 to 14-year-olds, half of those are already dieting. And if dieting is one of the biggest predictors of eating disorder, we have these young girls already feeling that they're too fat and beginning dieting. 69% of elementary school girls were reading magazines with body images that don't match their own body image. So they were already thinking, I don't match what I'm seeing in the media. Now, one of the biggest problems with it, there's problems everywhere with this, but it isn't just that it is occurring with teenage girls, which is one of the things we might think, because eating disorders are seen to develop in adolescent girls and then move kind of in those 20s, your 20s. But these eating disorders, and once they begin early, they continue across the lifespan. And in fact, we're seeing women who are 50 and older who have eating disorders. And part of that might be that it's a continuation or it's a reoccurrence of what happened when they were adolescents. But the other part of that is that as women age, right, our bodies change. So we get love handles and we get a little belly and we gain weight and we do those sorts of things that happen when you normally age. But even for 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, women, we follow those same media messages that are being given, which say you have to be thin and you have to be perfect. If you watch the ads that feature older women, what you're seeing generally is older women who are still beautiful, they just have gray hair. So now women who are older are also being told you have to achieve this ideal, which is basically impossible. to achieve. And one of the things that and here it is. We're hearing from women, no matter how old they are, that they still have to achieve that societal ideal of thinness and perfection. So even in their 50s and 60s, and believe it or not, beyond, 70-year-old women are engaging in extreme weight and shape control behaviors. So when we look at the research that has been done on eating disorders, almost all of it is focused on women who have already been clinically diagnosed as having an eating disorder, but subclinical women, those are women who are displaying symptoms of eating disorders but have not yet been clinically diagnosed, but they're still already displaying those symptoms, and chances are that they will likely move in to a diagnosed eating disorder. And when we think about, you can see right there the picture, which I love, of how thin she is on the scale, but that's how she sees herself, is as too overweight. And it's body dissatisfaction, believing that our bodies are not good enough, and body shame. Those are the things that lead to the development of these sorts of eating disorders. And again, they can last across a lifetime. Okay, so there are some protective factors that can help mitigate some of those feelings that we have with body dissatisfaction. Social support has been seen to be associated. So when I say social support, I mean a social network. So your friends, your family, those people that you can rely on to get support when you need it, to get help when you need it. And social support has been found to be protective against developing these eating disorders. And for adolescents, it's their parents. So when parents are not focused on weight, or when parents encourage physical activity, not as a means to lose weight for their daughters, but in a way to use their bodies in a healthy manner, then we're less likely to see adolescents with eating disorders. So parent support goes a long ways. For women, generally speaking, the most important relationship you have in your life is your spouse, right? That's the person who gives you the most support, and it's also the person who can be the worst if you're feeling those kinds of eating disorder behaviors, or you're feeling those body shaming sort of feelings about yourself. And it's been included, right, in a lot of theoretical models that social support helps us. So I've kind of got the same thing up there, right? Social influence, social people in our lives, they can encourage us to eat healthier. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of work that's been done on marriage as being incredibly important for health outcomes. Simply being married is predictive of better health outcomes. However, your marriage has to be high quality for it to actually matter. You can't, in fact, poor relationship quality in your marriage is worse for you than being single. So while we talk about marriage being beneficial to you, it has to be a high quality marriage. So again, I have up there, not all marriages are created equal, and we like to think that we're going to have that happily ever after, and it just doesn't always happen. So your spouse can be a source of positivity, right? He can be telling you, or she can be telling you good things about your body and your body image, but spouses can also be a source of criticism and conflict. So that really can take a toll on us physiologically, psychologically. People who are in poor relationships have worse health outcomes. They have worse physical outcomes, worse blood pressure, right? Because that's what I study all the time. And so those people, those intimate partners, they can impact how we feel about our bodies, our own self-esteem, how we evaluate our bodies. And this is the interesting thing. So men play a really important role in how women look. There's a study I've got right there. Men place high importance on women's body size and shape when they're dating. And in fact, there was a study done where they asked men who were dating and who were married whether they were satisfied with their partner's body weight. And 50% of dating men said that they would prefer their partner, their dating partner, lose weight, and about 30%, 1/3 of all men who were married said I would prefer to have my wife lose weight. So women worry about that sort of criticism from the person who is most intimate, in which relationship. And that sort of encouragement, and actually one of the biggest predictors of this dieting behavior or disordered eating behavior is encouragement from your spouse to diet. So when your spouse is encouraging you, you need to lose weight. That's the biggest predictor of disordered eating. Okay, so because a lot of the research has tended to focus on women who have already been diagnosed, in this study I really wanted to focus in on women with subclinical symptoms, right, who had not yet been diagnosed, but they were already displaying eating behavior and body dissatisfaction. And one of the things I wanted to look at was the physiological impact of what's happening in the relationship and then her body dissatisfaction, and so I used resting blood pressure. So this was a mixed method study, which means basically that I collected both quantitative and qualitative data on these women. We had them fill out information on demographics and relationship quality with their spouse. We had them fill out the SCOFF, which is a symptom assessment of eating disorder behavior. So you can see some of the questions there. Do you make yourself sick because you feel uncomfortably ill? Right? Do you worry that you've lost control about how much you weigh or how much you eat? Have you recently lost more than 14 pounds? Do you believe yourself to be fat when other people say you're thin? Would you say that food dominates your life? So they had to score between a 1 and 3 to be eligible. So they had to demonstrate at least one of those qualities, and they couldn't be diagnosed with any kind of eating disorder before that, and then were pregnant. So we looked at demographics, we looked at their thoughts and feelings in relation to eating, right? We had a couple of different eating disorder scales. One is the CHEDS, which was developed by Diane Spangler here at BYU. We looked at, it relates to body assessments, body feelings, and it's also eating related. We looked at physiological health, so whether they smoked or they drank, how much caffeine they had. We looked at relationship quality, and we measured it with this marital adjustment test. Then we had the one-on-one interviews. We had them do a body attitude survey. We took their blood pressure, so it was just a resting blood pressure is what we looked at. So they came into the lab, they sat for 10 minutes, because when you come in, you might be a little stressed, you might be a little nervous, you just ran up a flight of stairs, so we have everybody rest so their blood pressure, their heart rate will go back to normal, what's normal for them. And then we did 3 resting blood pressure assessments, each one a minute apart. Okay, those are some of the sample demographics. You can see that our women ranged between 21 and 47. They were married between 1 year and 25 years. So we don't just have a community sample or a BYU sample. We went out into the community and we were able to get women who had been married for quite a long time and who were older, right, than the typical BYU population of 18, 19, 20. You can see the rest of it, which is pretty typical also of this community. We had them answer these questions. So the first thing we looked at was body dissatisfaction. So we asked them to fill out these specific questions. My best physical feature is, my worst physical feature is, to use my body athletically makes me feel, when I see myself nude in the mirror, my reaction is, and in general, a word or phrase which best describes my feelings about my body is, and if I am engaged in sexual relations, I feel blank about my body. So you can see here that when they talked about my best physical feature, what they talked about were non-weight related items. So my best physical feature is my height. My best physical feature is my smile or my eyes, right, or my face or my lungs or my womb. All of these were non-weight related items, and you can see the difference between, oh, it didn't show my values. Okay, I don't know why it did that.
but you can see it's about 78% to about 22%. And you can see the lower one is weight-related, where most of them talked about their best physical feature. Okay, so also for body satisfaction, we asked them what their worst physical feature is. And you can see there, you can't, 50%, because the numbers didn't show up, 50% of the women who answered with some sort of area that had to do with the stomach, the belly, the tummy, the abdomen, the muffin top. Right? They were all weight-related items. And most of them focused on the stomach and the belly. And when they mentioned so when they talked about their worst physical features, you can see that, and you can't see, but it's like about 18, oh, is it 18%? No, it was 9, not even 10% of the women mentioned a non-weight-related item. Almost all of them, when they talked about their worst physical feature, mentioned a weight-related item. Okay, but when we ask them that when I use my body athletically, that makes me feel, and 79% of them, so I'm guessing from the numbers up there, since they don't show up, most of them said things like strong, good, more alive, right? Happy, energetic, and hopeful, capable. I loved awesome, empowered, great. And most of them, when we talked about using your body athletically, were much happier about it. Only 21% said tired, inadequate, weak, or out of shape. Okay, and when we talked about specifically when having sexual relations, how do I feel about my body? And you can see here again, almost 75% of the women said, positive. I feel confident, I feel good, I feel great, I feel pretty good, appreciated, awesome, sexy, right? 75% of these people, of these women, said that when I'm having sexual relations with my spouse or with my partner, I feel good about myself. And maybe you would sit there and say, well, that's pretty awesome. But here's the really awful part. 25%, 1/4 of all of our women did not like their bodies when they were having sexual relations. Now, the problem with that is that sexual relations should be that time, and the church in the handbook specifically says that sexual relations should be that time when husbands and wives come together and they develop this closeness, this intimacy when they're having. So sexual relations, according to the church, is not just for having children, but it is for developing emotional and intimacy bonds with your spouse. And 1/4 of our women didn't like their bodies. So how do you develop that intimacy with your spouse when you hate your body? When you're having sex and you don't like how you look, and if you don't like how you look, what are you focusing on? Oh my, I don't look good, he's gonna hate my belly because I hate my belly. Right, so that's a problem when 25% of our women, when having sex, still don't feel good about themselves. So we talked to them about romantic relationships, because here's the important part. So we asked them, how do you feel a relationship can influence, and then how specifically can your relationship influence how a woman feels about her body? And if you look at these quotes, they're all indicative of the idea that a romantic partner can make a woman feel either better about herself or worse. So when we looked at positive ways that women report it. So you can see number 123, I think it makes her feel better because you have somebody that loves your body and you're like, okay, maybe I love my body too. Right, differences when. And 135, it does make me feel better to realize that he sees me as beautiful and sexy, even if I don't. So number 140, I think the right romantic relationship can help a woman gain more confidence in herself. Right? So these women feel that their spouse can make them feel better, their partner. So how do you feel a romantic relationship can influence a woman about her body? And then we looked at the negative quotes that they said. So 124, I feel like I had to look a certain way and act a certain way, and even, sorry, I can't read, and even liked to be a certain way because he would always point out girls who were fat. So in other words, what she was talking about is that when they would walk around together, he would point out women and say that woman is fat. And then that made her much more conscious of how she looked because she realized that her husband was looking at women and calling them fat. 104, I thought that was really an interesting one. I think that an unsupportive man can cause doubts and confusion in a body image faster than religion, faster than media, faster than anything. And we talk all the time about how media messes, right, with a woman's view of her own body. This woman said that her husband, her spouse, could mess up her view even more than religion, even more than media. That last one, if you don't make it seem like you like my body, or that you like what you see, or what I look, I'm going to hate my body even more. So spouses make a big difference. So, is body satisfaction related to marital quality? We found that it was. Right, so when we looked at this sample of these subclinical women, we could see back here how they felt. So then we asked them, what is your relationship like with your spouse? And what we found in this sample is that as marital quality increased, body satisfaction during sexual activity increased. Right, so here's some quotes as well down there at the 117. He always tries to make me feel better because he knows the insecurities I have or the parts of my body that I don't like, and he says, okay, this is my favorite one. Well, those are my favorite. I'm like, I don't like my legs, and he says, I love your legs. They're great. So he is always there to counter my negativity. Up there at 119 as well, he says, I understand how you're feeling, and he'll love you, reassuring, you look great, and I still love you. I don't know about the still. Should be, you look great, and I love you, right? So relationship quality was associated with eating disorders, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So how you viewed your relationship, good or bad, had an impact on eating disorders and feelings. And the worse the relationship quality, then we saw the higher eating disorders, the higher body dissatisfaction, right, all of those behaviors and all of those thoughts. So these women, 106, I might be embarrassed because I wanted to eat a McDonald's hamburger, and I would go do that when he wasn't around so that he wouldn't have anything to say about it. And in fact, when we talked about their behaviors and we asked them, they often said, he judges me, and so I eat when he's not around. Okay. So now we know what relationships can do to eating behavior. Then I was interested in how does that impact beyond eating behaviors, physiological health. So I looked at resting blood pressure. Remember, we looked at that. And the question that was asked, when I see myself nude in the mirror, then they need to say a reaction, right? They gave us a reaction. And in general, they were asked the phrase which generally describes their feelings about my body. Okay, those who came up with a positive answer about how they felt when they saw themselves nude in front of the mirror, their blood pressure was much lower than those who viewed their bodies as negatively. And that might not look like a lot. You're saying, oh, well, it's 113 systolic compared to 116, really? But 3 millimeters of mercury, so from 113 to 116 is considered significant as far as hypertension. These weren't hypertension, you have to be over 120. But you can see already those views about their body are having an impact on their blood pressure. Okay, here's some of the quotes that they said. So body satisfaction. When I see myself nude in the mirror, my reaction is I like myself. It's mostly positive, not bad, I look good, right? Satisfied, confident. Well, that part isn't bad, and proud. The two best up there are proud and confident, maybe even satisfied, but not bad. I mean, that's the best we could pull out for a positive. When I see myself nude in the mirror, my reaction is gross, disappointment, appalled. I need to lose weight, I need to get in shape, not to look. I'm fat, to look away, you look awful, and disgust. So when we look again at eating behavior on resting blood pressure, so again, we see that when women are, have better eating behavior, that as well impacts their resting systolic blood pressure. So these were some of the quotes, and you can see we use this CHEDS. That's the one developed by Diane Spangler here at BYU. And so you can see the differences in blood pressure there as well. Those who reported positive eating behaviors, right, not as bad, then you can see that their blood pressure also is lower. So 118 to 122, now that is significant as well because that's 4 millimeters of mercury higher for systolic blood pressure. And these were some of the quotes that we had. I've got 117. Yeah, I still kind of do eating behaviors, right? If we just had eaten lunch or we were going out to dinner, I may be hungry again, but I feel like I shouldn't be. And so I watch how I eat and maybe eat a little bit later, just because no girl wants to feel like they're a pig. And 138, when I'm alone, I feel like I have control over what I'm eating, but when I'm with my spouse, I feel like we've got to compromise. And I feel like compromise is usually leaning his way. I definitely feel more comfortable when I am alone, when we're talking about eating behavior. But I feel my spouse's influence is still there in my mind. So she still wants to eat when he's not there. Okay, here's our implications. So these subclinical women who have not been diagnosed with a clinical eating disorder are still showing these huge feelings of body dissatisfaction and distorted eating behaviors, right? So, and the important thing here is subclinical women. These women had a more positive view of their bodies when they were thinking of their bodies in motion. Remember when they thought athletically about their bodies? They had really good feelings. So the point here is that when they viewed their bodies in motion, they had a much more positive attitude about their bodies when as opposed to when they just thought of their bodies as being viewed, right, as being seen. Okay, so marital quality can affect body dissatisfaction and eating behavior in these women who are not yet diagnosed, and it can impact health through blood pressure, right, which, and as I told you before, blood pressure is a predictor of future cardiovascular disease. Right, so what we should do in the future is we need to take a better look at how marriage quality in women who have not yet been diagnosed, rather than just focusing on those women who have been diagnosed. And we should take a look at those, right, and see how we can increase body satisfaction via what their bodies can do, rather than what their bodies look like. We do have limitations to our study, right? Most of the women were white. This is indicative, again, of our community. Most of them were highly educated, so even if they hadn't graduated, so even if they didn't have degrees at that point, they were mostly in college and they were earning degrees. And they were fairly young. I mean, even though we had some older women in it, our mean age was like 25. And that's everybody who helped. So that's, Jordan actually was a student when we started this. She's since graduated, but this is something she was really interested in. And there's my lab right now, and there we are presenting data on it. So there you go.
So we are so grateful for the attention Dr. Birmingham has brought to this issue by speaking to us today and emphasizing the importance we must place on eating disorders in relation to our relationships amongst one another. So stated by Professor Birmingham, relationship quality can have a tremendous effect on our body dissatisfaction and eating behavior. And this is something we as women must take into consideration as we move forward in our lives. Growing up as young women, we are often body conscious from a young age, constantly worrying about the number on the scale or even our outward appearance. This is rooted in a systematically sexist ideal perpetuated by the media for generations. The media does over-sexualize women and creates an unrealistic norm that women are then compared to, resulting in women often feeling obligated to conform. However, oftentimes these standards are unobtainable and extremely unhealthy to maintain, leading to disordered eating and unhealthy body image, as we've seen in the presentation. So it is important that as we move forward, we become more socially aware of our contribution to the matter, and this starts with having the hard conversations and recognizing the harmful standards we place on women through our daily language alone, which is full of this internalized social norm. So we often do it unintentionally. However, the impact can be crucial, so we must lean away from the casual, wow, have you lost weight? You look really good. For commentary like this often instills this idea that we must look thin to look desirable.
Students, as you head into your adult lives, you must remember the importance of finding not only a partner who loves you, but also supports you emotionally and psychologically. Each and every one of us are given the tools and knowledge to be the difference that we wish to see in the world. Lead the hard conversations, correct your friends when they engage in fat-phobic language, and be the parents who instill the importance of health in their children, not unattainable beauty standards. As we do more research, the numbers are showing more and more how necessary it is that we make change now. Thank you, Dr. Birmingham, for all your hard work and your presentation. We now turn the time over to Caitlin for our Q&A.
We will now open the floor for a brief Q&A for Dr. Birmingham. After the first question is read, if you could please create a line behind me on the left-hand side of the podium. Our remaining time is limited, so please be respectful in the number and length of questions asked. Our first question for you, Dr. Birmingham, is what type of language should be avoided in order to discourage the unconscious support we give to women's unhealthy dieting and poor body image issues? What type of language should be avoided in order to discourage the unconscious support we give to women's unhealthy dieting and poor body image issues?
So one thing we do is, as noted, we comment on how women look. So language-wise, we have a woman in our department who recently just lost a lot of weight, and I found myself saying to her, wow, you look great. Which, is that an indication that she didn't look great beforehand? And I think we use that language all the time, that we tell women who have lost weight, wow, you look really good. I mean, I don't think we tell women, wow, you've really gained a lot of weight, although, maybe we do. But the implication there is that you look better now that you've lost weight.
I just had a question about your study. This wasn't really specified, but did you only test relationships that were heterosexual? Do you
Yes.
think the results would differ if you tested homosexual
I don't know that
relationships?
they would be different. I think we'd see the same sorts of things. I read literature that definitely said that we see those same sorts of things in non-heterosexual couples. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
would love to do it and look at gay and lesbian couples. I would love to do that somewhere down the line,
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So my question is, it's specifically about your methods. When you did the qualitative study at the counseling center, is there any way that you accounted for the framing questions and organized your survey in a way that didn't
Yeah.
lead anyone to certain positive or negative
Yeah,
feelings?
we did, and we didn't do it over the counseling center. We actually did it in my lab.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, we had created an interview guide that had specific questions that were going to be asked, and then prompts if participants weren't really sure what was being asked. So those were all created beforehand, and we had intensive training meetings with our research assistants. So gosh, it was at least 4 sessions, up to 2 hours per session, where we had them interview each other, and we went through the study guide, so they were very familiar with the questions they were asking. So that led into they weren't supposed to ask leading questions. We also talked about not having yes/no questions. So a question like, tell me more about how that makes you feel, instead, does that make you feel bad? Right, then the answer
Right.
would be no. And then we have no more information.
Gotcha. Thank you.
what thoughts do you have about treating eating disorders after doing this research that might be different than what you thought before?
I don't know that I have any ideas on actually treating it, and I would say that's because I'm not a clinical counselor, and I'm not also an eating behavior counselor. I would say that what we need to do is focus more on what that relationship quality is like, and I think we can do that also by encouraging women to know who you're marrying, right? Have conversations about this. If he knows you have issues with your body, then you might want to discuss that sort of thing before you get married. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't do that, so yeah. I just want to know what's happening, and I don't really want to fix it.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, I want it fixed. I just don't know how to do it myself.
I'm curious if you have thought about or explored any trends specifically in the Utah area, since you're surveying Utah, most likely LDS women, if there's any like cultural, societal factors that you think play into the body image things.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a cultural issue in Utah, simply because we're an area, we're a church, right, who focuses on perfection. And so we, in terms of our spirituality, need to be perfect. That's what we're always aiming for. And then, unfortunately, that carries over into our bodies as well. But as far as, is this straight, just only a cultural thing? No. I mean, here in Utah, no. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And we did clearly only focus on Utah County, so it would be lovely to go outside of the valley and do further.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that having support is one of the main things with people who are suffering from eating disorders. And what would you say is the best way to support someone that is going through that?
As like a friend, are you saying, rather than a spouse?
Yeah, as a friend.
I think being aware, and especially with bulimia, people just aren't aware. Unless you're there with your friends while they're throwing up or while they're not eating, often we're just not aware of what's going on with our friends. And so maybe the main thing is we just need to be more aware. We need to be paying attention. And if your friend or the person in your network tends to be speaking a lot about dieting or is mentioning body or constantly saying, I really need to lose this weight, or I hate this part of my body, maybe that's a clue that you need to start maybe delving into what they're thinking. And being supportive that way, without saying, no, you probably do need to lose 10 pounds and then you'd look great,
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, right? Oh.
Sorry, can I just ask you?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
They get mad in the back. Sorry. Okay. My question would be for women who are looking to lose weight for health reasons and looking for like a healthy way of dieting and stuff. What would you say is like the best way that a spouse could support them in that without like getting into this scary place?
Yeah. I think it's always tricky when your spouse is telling you need to lose weight. That's always tricky. Is it for your health? Maybe the best way is to say, I want to be healthy too, so let's do this together. And the conversation is about health and not about you need to lose, you're getting a few love handles there. I think it's the conversation between a husband and wife and his willingness to participate as well in becoming healthy.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I have time? No? Okay.
Okay.
We'd like to thank Dr. Birmingham for her time and for coming to share her message with us. So if we could just give her one more round of applause.